Hold on 1 second. I gotta get this cat out of here. Sorry, Tim.
Holding on for the cat.
Hey,
the cat loves Chachi. Joanie loves heroin. Cats love Chachi. Chachi loves flatter.
sorry.
Just to recap while you were gone, Joanie loves heroin. Cats love Chachi. Chachi loves the Flat Earth Society. Hey everyone ever, and welcome to 20th Century Pop, the show where we try to understand the present while living in the past. My name is Tim Blevins.
And I am Bob Canning.
And Bob, welcome back? Is that proper to say? I guess we went a week without the show.
Sure, yeah.
To the fill in that space.
How did we let that happen?
I think we missed a recording session because of my error or something that was going on in my life. And so 20 people were let down. Well, maybe not everyone that subscribed, but a portion of our guaranteed audience may have noticed that week they didn't have to pretend to like some Facebook post I put up.
Well, I'm glad we're back.
I think I am. Yeah, we're back. It's September. It's almost fall. It's school time, maybe. I don't know. This,
true.
At least growing up, this would have been an era of school. I mean, you have kids, so I don't know if moving into fall, moving into September, I don't know if that has any meaning or value.
It definitely does. I mean, I prefer the school year. Now that I have kids, well, even, I don't know, maybe I didn't when I was younger, but now that I'm a father, I prefer the school year because it has routine, it has a schedule. I know where my children are during the day. So it's definitely my preferred time of year.
Do you see in any of their practices of going to school or their day-to-day routine, do you see anything that looks familiar towards your life? Like, does that seem like what your life would have been at that age with school and everything?
Yes and no. It's kind of hard to say because I'm not.
That was all of the answers.
Yeah,
all of the answers.
There's all of them. Yes. Maybe. I'll throw in a maybe, and I'm not sure. I'm in a different school district than where I grew up, and it's a sort of different thing. So I grew up in upstate New York, and now we're in Southern California, and so there's different ways that things are done and different ways the schools are set up, and so there's a lot that's just new to me that will never be the same as my childhood. But then there's the things like doing the homework and doing projects and that kind of stuff and wanting not to do them and wanting to watch TV instead, or wanting to work on this part of the homework because it involves coloring as opposed to this part because it involves math. So, I see that.
Both of your daughters, they're in actual grades of school. They're not in high school yet, are they?
No, yeah, they're still young.
But do they watch shows about high school?
No. Yeah, that's part of why I'm excited that they're getting at this age where they can stay up a little later and watch these other shows. Because right now they're still watching Odd Squad, which is a kids show run, a world run by kids. What else? They're watching Arthur. They're watching, animated afternoon stuff. So they're not watching shows like what we're going to talk about today. That just hasn't crossed their path yet.
Well, what are we going to talk about today? What is today's topic?
Today's topic is the one-season wonder, Square Pegs.
Yes, one of my favorite shows of the 80s. I loved this show, and I loved it when it was on. And I was asking about your own kids, because when this show aired, it aired in 1982. It aired from September 27th, 1982 to March 7th, 1983. Like you said, a single-season show. And I remember, I think we probably watched it for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, my brother and I was in second grade.
Yeah. When
the show aired. I didn't, I didn't know high school. I didn't know from any of that kind of setup. So but this show, I don't even know how I understood it, because it's a show set in a high school in the 80s, and we'll get into it in a minute. But yeah, was this a program you watched? Were you familiar with Square Pegs prior to researching it for the episode?
I was not aware of the television show existing until I was in college. And
So
even
how
then,
did
I
you
didn't.
hear about it then?
Oh, other people talking about it, and it might have been late college and after college. I know you probably talked about it, and just other people would talk about it. And then I heard about it more as Sara Jessica Parker took off with Sex and the City, and it just would come up occasionally. But I've never seen an episode until this past week when I watched these episodes that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, it's not a show I've ever really talked about with people. It's one of those things like thinking about doing it for the show when that was kind of coming up. I was getting excited about it. I also realized like whenever I list my favorite shows, and we're talking about programs from the past and stuff, I don't think I ever bring this up. This wasn't something, even when it was on, I don't remember sharing the show. I don't know if I did that back then, but it wasn't like I was talking to my friends about the show. My brother and I watched it, and that was about it, and it existed. And I don't know if I knew how TV seasons worked at that point, but it existed. I think there was a show on before it. That was I don't know what was on before. I have vague memories, and I was looking on YouTube of a couple shows that might have been on. I think there was this Son of Zorro sitcom that we used to watch, and it would lead into this. But I'm curious, because what we're going to do today, we're doing something called a binge and podcast. We watched 4 episodes of the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. And I'm curious to talk about it with you to see how that conversation goes, because I don't know why exactly I love this at age, what are you, in second grade? 7?
Yes, 7 or 8. Like I think I was 8, so that would have put me in 3rd grade, I think.
So what were you watching in
Second or third
1982? Like, do you know what was on at that time? Do you know kind of what was on the airwaves?
I actually I looked it up because I wanted to kind of figure out how I missed the show. Like it was never on my radar. And basically I think what was happening is I was watching what my mother was watching, and she probably had no interest in this show.
Okay.
And so I was watching, I think it was That's Incredible is what aired opposite this on ABC.
That is incredible.
So that I remember, that and Real People, that kind of programming is what my mother was watching.
So like the live action sort of, not variety show, but kind of human interest stories. Were you watching any sitcoms at this time? Were you watching half-hour comedies?
I think they came in the next couple of years, though, because I know I got into Family Ties. And then after that, the ABC shows, that was much later in the 80s, I think. But no, I really wasn't watching too many sitcoms. I know that, I know my mother watched Dallas, and that was like later in like, I think it was older than this. That was always a sign that it was time for bed once I started to hear that Dallas theme.
I love the Dallas theme. I've actually listened to that recently, but you're right. I think that show was on Friday nights. So I think sometimes it'd be like a Bugs Bunny special or something. Then it was time to go to bed. And on the way up the stairs, we'd hear the Dallas theme. And so I do have that sense memory to that.
Yeah.
But 1982 on TV, I looked up a little bit because I was curious, like we're talking about what else was on the air. 1982, when this show debuted, a couple other shows, just to give you a sense of what the TV landscape was like at the time. Earlier in 1982, so this might have been in like January, February, Fame, the TV show Fame premiered on TV. So that's kind of about a high school. It's kind of a heightened version of an art school for dancing and singing.
And I watched Fame.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I don't know if I watched it the season it premiered, but I did end up watching Fame.
Okay, I never watched Fame. Another show that's thinking about sitcoms, Joanie Loves Chachi aired. Came to the air. I don't know. Were you watching Happy Days? Was that a show you followed?
Here's my thing about Happy Days. Happy Days, and there's probably a couple other shows where I don't know if I was watching the new seasons or reruns or syndicated of those shows, but like Happy Days and MASH, they sort of all kind of blended together when I was younger and would see them. There's probably others, but Happy Days for sure. It seemed like it was on all the time somewhere when I was younger.
I think it was. I think it was in constant rotation, like syndication. But yeah. I think what you're saying is interesting. Like early memories of TV. Yeah, I guess you're at the whim of whoever is wielding it's not a remote even. They have to get up and turn the channel. Maybe that's why we'd stay on one show. It's so much effort to change it. But it's like, yeah, I don't remember picking and choosing shows. I mean, 1982 is when Family Ties premiered. It's when Cheers premiered. And eventually I would go on and really follow those shows. But in terms of a show where I'm like, I got to watch that, maybe Different Strokes, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, these were shows that we watched. But these are, again, there were shows that our parents put on for us because they liked them as well. This show, Square Pegs, my brother and I stumbled across it, and I can only guess. So if I was 7, he was 9. He must have been aware of Saturday Night Live because Square Pegs is a show. It was created by Ann Beats, who's one of the original writers on Saturday Night Live. She was also a contributor to National Lampoon in the 70s. And this was her show. So I'm guessing that's what brought us to it. My brother's fandom for Saturday Night Live and his knowledge of maybe who she was is why we watched this. And I really only mentioned that
because... So he would have been aware of that? Like, that was... When I was a kid, I never knew that kind of stuff. Like, I never... It was like years later I would find out how comedians and writers and actors are tied to projects. I never knew that ahead of time.
So yeah, I don't know. Neither one of us was in high school. I don't know what was getting us into this show. And I guess I was mentioning Ann Beats because I think there's some important things about that is, I mean, looking at the landscape of TV at the time, there wasn't a show like this.
No.
I mean, there weren't a lot of female showrunners. It was, especially in comedy.
Excuse me. I mean, again, this was the first time I've ever seen the show, and a couple things stood out right away. It looked like nothing that I saw growing up. It's single camera, which...
Yeah, it's a single camera show.
A single camera comedy with a laugh track. So, like, I didn't see anything like that until Sports Night was on. And even that,
really? You didn't watch, like, the Days and Nights of Molly Dodd?
I did
or
not.
Or L.A. Law? That's a funny one.
But did Days and Nights of Molly Dodd have a laugh track?
No, I don't think it did. You're right.
Like, this was, like, just a weird, especially for that time, at least from my memory, it was a weird thing to see that this was from 1982, a single camera sitcom with a laugh track. But then also, all the names were female names, at least in the first episode, especially produced by, written by, directed by, were all female names, which I thought was pretty outstanding.
I think that's incredibly impactful. I mean, Ann Beats from Saturday Night Live, who created it, is a very major force in, I think, where comedy went in the 70s and 80s, because she was infiltrating basically what was a chauvinistic boys club. The Harvard Lampoon, the National Lampoon, all these, the Ivan Reitman films, even Saturday Night Live. I mean, these are boy mentality driven shows that she was hired for, and she had to fight to get her stuff on. And so I think getting a show and running a show, I mean, she staffed it with strong female writers, and strong female directors, which again, I wouldn't have been aware of this then, but looking at the show now, it is an amazing... Anomaly is the wrong word, but it's like this is a rarity at the time, and I'm glad it got on the air. I mean, Janice Hirsch and Marjorie Gross are two authors who went on to work on things that I love, like Anything But Love, and they started on this show. Rosie Schuster, who is another writer from the original Saturday Night Live, she's on the show. Like, there is something going on with that again, as a child I wasn't aware of, but you're right, it's very distinctive looking. It's different looking than anything else on TV. And to get into the show a little bit, the opening credits kind of establishes exactly what this show is about, I thought, anyways. There's a little bit of narration at the beginning. There's two main characters, and we'll talk about the characters in a minute. But they're talking back and forth about this idea of cliques. Is that a word you use? Are you familiar with the concept of, like, cliques in high school? That is, yeah.
Yeah. The jocks. The nerds. The drama geeks. But then there's also cliques of people. Just friends that will always stick together until one of them has a falling out. But yes, cliques. Very aware of what a clique is.
That's what they're introducing, and the narration is kind of about how that year the two main characters, Lauren and Patty, want to infiltrate the school cliques. They want to be popular. They want to click with the right cliques, is what they say. And as a concept... do you remember this in school? Do you remember the idea of cliques in school? Was that something you were aware of?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. I mean, there were definitely a separation of friend groups, not always separated by sports or drama. There could be some crossovers, but definitely friend groups that if you're not in their group, then you're never going to be in their group, and there's no point Even if it'd be those types of things where you have a one-on-one with one of those people. You get along fine. You maybe make each other laugh. You have a good time. But then when they're with their friends, you are non-existent because you are not a part of their group.
That's not sports related, or that's not
right.
Like, it's interesting. You started saying those because those are the cliches. I understand. You have the typical, and I think you had this at the time. It's kind of like you've got your cool greaser kids, you've got your astute jocks, you got your nerdy pocket professor geeks or pocket protector geeks. Like, these were archetype television cliques. You're describing something which is more how friends interact, and that's not something I think I had seen on TV before. I think this show, I feel like the way this show is set up, the introduction makes me think of, a 1999 or 2000 series, Freaks and Geeks. Like, it sets up this stance that you're going to see all the different cliques in the school and how do they interact and how they maneuver. And in reality, let's talk about the characters a little bit, because it's not a clear-cut show. You're not getting, these are nerds, these are jocks, these are theater majors. You're getting, well, start with the two leads. You're getting Lauren and Patty. Patty's played by Sara Jessica Parker, who I think I fell in love with from this show. And then Lauren is played by Amy Linker, I believe. And how would you describe both of them as characters? They are our entry characters. They're the main characters. Like, what is their clique? Where do they stand in the school?
I think they are not seen by the school. I think no one really pays any mind to them. They're sort of neutral. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I felt from this first episode, that they're friends. And I again, we're kind of starting, I think, what we'd start with, episode 12?
12 or 13. I found conflicting numberings for him, but yeah.
Yeah, so we're well into the middle of the first season, if it was a 22-episode season. So I'm not sure how it was established, but I got the sense that these were friends from elementary school. They've been friends forever, the two of them, and they haven't really ventured much beyond each other, and they just are sort of unseen by everyone else at the school. There's nothing that they do that ever makes them stand out. And they want to stand out.
And they do. Well, do they? They say they want to.
They say they want to, yeah.
Or at least one of them does. I love Patty and Lauren because I feel like they kind of look like... Do you ever watch the show Broad City? Are you familiar with that show?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't really followed it. I haven't
There's two characters on that, Abby and Alana, and Patty and Lauren seem almost like 80s child versions of them, which might be why I love Broad City, sort of. I mean, as a kid, briefly, when the show was airing, Patty and Lauren were kind of my ideals of a kid. I loved these characters, and I didn't get, and I think what you're saying is interesting. Like, it's not that they're nerds, it's not that they're geeks. I mean, Patty has glasses, Lauren has braces, so they have the physical manifestations of being awkward, I guess. But you're right, they're non-existent in the school. Yeah, not to everyone. They have a couple friends that we'll get into, but was that relatable to you? Is that idea sort of something you recognized from school?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, there's always other people that are getting the attention. There's always the girl that you want to talk to, but she doesn't seem to even know you're there. Sure, that was very relatable. And in watching this, that was one of those unique things that stood out to me, because all the other shows that I was familiar with or have a memory of now were based or centered around characters that were very noticeable. They all had something very unique about them. They were either the pretty one or the jock or clearly the loser of the school, but still something noticeable about them. Whereas these two were just neutral, kind of normal characters, especially in this world that was created here, which has got many abnormal characters in it.
Well, let's look at some of them then, I think, first, and then we'll get into the episode. Who are a couple of the characters that stand out to you? Because there's some main kids. They're all freshmen, which was the one thing I was going to ask you. Do they all seem to be the same age to you?
No, and that kind of confused me too. Again, coming into it, completely blind, and then also well into the season, I really didn't get what the establishment was. I didn't know because I kind of felt like maybe our two main characters were in a higher grade than they should have been because they made it maybe were smarter or academically inclined, whereas they're in with these older kids because everybody around them seemed older. But these older kids aren't as academic. So I thought maybe that's how it was. But then, yeah, at some point it made it clear that they were all freshmen, which did not make sense to me, but I went with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody else seemed older.
I mean, as a kid, as a 7-year-old watching this, I don't think I would have known or had to make that distinction because every character would be older. But yeah, I do feel like Patty and Lauren are freshmen. I get that. It makes sense to me. But like looking at some of the other kids in the school, I mean, they have 2 friends, I think, right? There's 2 friends.
Marshall and Johnny, who I think is nicknamed Slash. Is that right?
Johnny Slash is what they call him. And the actor who plays him played Kirk's son in Star Trek 2 and 3. And that's the character. He's got sunglasses that he keeps pulling down. He's into new wave, not punk music. He makes all these distinctions. And as a kid, I thought this guy was so cool. My memory of the show, at least, is that he was the coolest guy in the school.
Sure.
I not that I was thinking these words at the time, but I was like, this is a guy who transcends cliques, or whatever. But rewatching these episodes, he's a nerd, actually. He's the one character I think you can point to and say that he's like a nerd, but he's like an untouchable one that's sort of immune from the verbal abuse. Like, I don't know if he's dumb. He just has a different perception of things, and he's not impacted by being called out and stuff. And I don't think there's a character prior to that was like that on TV.
Yeah, he really threw me because, like you're saying, he comes off as a cool kid, just by appearance, because I kind of had spiky hair and the glasses, and he just dressed cool for that time, I suppose. But you're right, he hangs out with the nerds, I guess, or the outcasts. But he's into cool music, and he's got the glasses, and he's just, I kind of felt like he was maybe even a little drugged out. They don't.
It's possible.
They don't reference that directly, but it's like. And to me, at that age especially, I would have thought that he's cool because he's on drugs. Good for him. So none of the characters really exactly fit. I started to think that maybe that they weren't sure what the Valley Girl should actually be like or what the nerd should actually be like, and they were just kind of mishmashing stuff because the Valley Girl character
Jennifer. It's like the 80s schoolgirl Jennifer.
Played by the always wonderful Tracy Nelson.
Did you recognize her?
I recognized her right away. I was a big Father Dowling Mysteries fan. And
really?
When I say I was, my mother was. And so I also watched the Father Dowling Mysteries.
And she plays a nun on that show?
Yes, she does.
Okay.
What
did you think when you saw her here? Because that wasn't that long after this, was it?
Well, it's probably 8 years, maybe.
Oh, really?
It was late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't have a sense of when that aired.
I think we can double check that. But I recognized her right away. And here's the thing: I know you really like the show, but my initial impression of the show, and actually it still holds true, it's not well acted.
What?
It's not well acted. There are people that are good. The leads are good, but some of these extras, some of these secondary characters, including Tracy Nelson and some of the other guys, like Tracy Nelson is supposed to be a Valley Girl. She doesn't dress like a Valley Girl. She dresses like a Sunday school teacher half the time. Her hair is short instead of you would expect long blonde hair, and her Valley Girl accent goes in and out. And it's also not really Valley Girl. It's more like just a bored person.
Which is great.
It's fine.
I loved her slang as a kid. I wanted to talk like that as a kid when I heard. I remember her talking.
And see, as a kid, I don't have that kid impression of it. As a kid, that probably makes sense. It's new. It's what you think that should be. Coming at it from having seen other Valley Girls and having lived in the Valley. This isn't a Valley Girl. This is a TV show impersonation of a Valley girl.
Well, where do you think the show takes place? I don't know where WEEMAWEE High School is located.
I thought it was in Minnesota, based on the name of the school, which I think you just said, right? WEEMAWEE?
Yeah.
Like I just thought,
WEEMAWEE,
yeah, I thought it was like some sort of Minnesota kind of place, but I thought it was like a nondescript sort of just somewhere in the middle of the country. I didn't think it was Southern California.
I don't think it is. That's why I don't think she's necessarily doing a Valley Girl in the sense of
then what we know
from TV and movies. She has this 80s slang accent. She has this disaffected accent that maybe she picked up from movies and the mall culture. But you didn't have people dressed like that in your school or similar. Like, that's the thing. Like, when I think of 80s movies normally, I think of John Hughes movies. I think of Saved by the Bell, I guess that's more 90s. But I think of the fashions that went on to be 80s fashions and these clothes. But in reality, my school, people would have dressed more like her. We didn't have the outlandish cinema-ready clothing. And again, I'm saying this in retrospect because in second grade, we were all wearing T-shirts and Oshkosh bagoshes. But I just feel like I think what she's wearing is appropriate in the sense appropriate. That's a dumb word. But I mean, I think it's reflective of the reality, because these aren't cinema people. These aren't movie characters. These are kids in a school. And the fact that we don't know where it's taking place means that you're getting this melting pot of personalities versus, again, we're not getting she is the cruelest person in the school is my guess. But I thought that was also realistic, the way that she was cruel. I think kids can be cruel.
I agree.
And I think she wasn't the most popular girl. That's never really approached. And she wasn't a cheerleader, but she had this slang, which I really enjoyed. Like, I get what you're saying a little bit, like the acting is a little stilted, but that's also 80s acting. I think that is a little bit on shows.
See, I was thinking about that too. And one thing I thought, and then I went back and looked to see what else was there, but you say like Family Ties premiered this year and other shows that had been on for a while. I don't know why Benson popped into my head, but I had to look up when Benson was on because, I mean, this was a different approach to sitcoms with the single camera and just the way.
No actual audience. They're not playing to
they're not playing to anybody. And so it definitely has a different feel. And so that kind of stood out to me because it seemed like clearly, and you might know more than I do, but it seemed to me like somebody was really taking a risk with the way that they were putting the show together, because I couldn't find any other shows from that era that were anywhere similar to this. They're, like Family Ties and Benson were very, uniform. They had their 3 acts, and it was standard television sitcom, well acted, well cast. And this seemed like a hodgepodge mess of people just really taking an opportunity and throwing something together. And it didn't always work, and the acting wasn't always great, and some of it was over the top cartoonish, and some of it was like, heart-wrenching real. And so I got why this must have connected with so many people, and people continue to talk about it, even though it was the short-lived show that I don't think got a lot of acclaim. Or did it? Do you have any idea like how it was critically received?
I think it was well reviewed. I think people enjoyed the show. I mean, I think it had the following too. It wasn't bottom of the ratings. I did a little bit of reading. There's a pretty famous TV guide expose that came out after the show was off the air. Apparently, the way the show was run was sort of emulating how Saturday Night Live was run. I think it was very last-minute scripts, very fly by the seat of their pants, very much everyone who works on the show is in charge of the show. And then anonymously from the set, from what reports were saying, there was also a lot of rampant drug use. And I don't think drug use necessarily derails a show, but in a show where your cast is kids, I'm assuming it was the adults and the staff that the article is talking about. So I think that added to some difficulties on the sets, both with the cast and just with stuff falling behind schedule. Like, I think it was trying to emulate the 70s comedy wave on a sitcom, but it was doing it with maybe a staff that could live up to that, but with kids as actors who couldn't. I think it was applying the mentality of how those shows were made to something like this, and that might be why it fell apart. But I think it was well liked. I'm surprised that I don't talk about it with more people. But I was posting a little bit that we were going to be talking about the show, and a few people were like, "Oh, I love the show." I'm like, "Yeah, why did we never talk about the show?"
Yeah. Is it maybe because you couldn't get to it? It only ran for a season, so you didn't have syndication like you did maybe with Family Ties or
No,
Cheers.
except I remember they did rerun it on like Comedy Central.
Did they?
I remember seeing that in the early 90s. There's a
Okay.
DVD set that's a really nice set. It's on YouTube. I mean, you're right. I think there was a period where that was happening, but we're in an age now where you can reach back and find anything to watch. When we're done with this, I can go watch a Max Steel RoboForce cartoon special if I wanted to.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's why maybe though you weren't talking about it growing up though, because you didn't have that access.
Well,
And
how did you hear about it? You said you've heard about the show.
I started hearing about it in college, perhaps when it was rerunning on Nickelodeon or Comedy Central or wherever, when people were reminded of it. Perhaps that's when it started to come back into people's mindsets that remembered it from when they watched it.
Kind of feeling like you might not have enjoyed this show. Let's talk about it, the first episode we watched and see a little bit. So the first one we watched was called "It's All How You See Things," and it's a pretty simple 2-plot episode. Patty, who wears glasses, doesn't want to wear glasses, and there's a radio station. That's at the school. That's basically the plot.
Yeah.
And the show follows the structure. The plots are pretty simply laid out. It's a simple thing. I got glasses. Actually, I got glasses at the start of my freshman year. I didn't want them, so I get that. I mean,
I had braces.
Did you have braces?
I did. I had braces in middle school and probably my freshman year of high school, I think.
Was that I never had braces. Was that a torturous thing to have? Was that?
It never seemed to bother me socially because I was never social. I wasn't picked on for having braces. I didn't feel bad for having braces. I didn't like braces because I don't like the dentist. I don't like people messing with my mouth like that. But at the same time, I could relate to what was going on with these characters. It helped that they had something that, a lot of us kids had.
But that's the gist of the plot.
Right.
She doesn't want her glasses. And it's interesting. I think Sara Jessica Parker I think both of the leads are amazing on the show. They're very convincing as these characters. I don't think it's convincing. It's a little sitcom-y how blind she is without her glasses. And there are some strangely staged scenes with that.
And it's not like she doesn't have the glasses in her pocket. Like if I remember from watching it, she takes her glasses off, puts them in her bag, and then refuses to put them on even when she's causing damage or talking to people incorrectly. It's like, just put your glasses on for a second.
Yeah, I guess that's a moment where the show got a little too sitcom-y, but I feel like she really sells it. I feel like she pulls that through, and maybe a different actor wouldn't. I just find it interesting that because a lot of this show, I feel like this is a show that would work better now than it worked then. I think there's more TV shows like this now. I think this is a bitter show. This isn't a happy show. This isn't a show with a more morality lesson or a moral to teach. This is a show about how much it sucks to be in school.
And I got excited watching this episode first because, and I was hoping it would be this way, like for all the episodes, it turned out not. But in this episode, there are no teachers and there are no parents. And I really thought that that's what the show was. Like it was like basically a high school Peanuts gang where all you see are the kids and their adventures and their doings and how they relate to each other, because there were no teachers in this. And I thought it was awesome that that's how this whole episode was presented.
Well, I think that's important, and I think that's a realistic view. The route to go, and Welcome Back Kotter did this, most sitcoms did this in the 80s, is you give the kids a parental mentor. You give them the one outsider teacher or the one stuffy Mr. whatever his name was on Boy Meets World teacher that is there to dole out some advice. And every now and then they might have a little problem. The kids let them see the world differently, but you give them a parent figure to gravitate to. And like you said, like with Peanuts, we don't have that with Charlie Brown, and we don't really have it on the show. The adults on the show are either idiots or sex vamps, as we'll get into in a little bit. Like, they aren't there to teach. They aren't there to be a role model. And I do think that's consistent through the show. And I think that was one of the show's charms. Like you're saying, it's these kids' world. And I wanted to ask you that. Was your school set up that way? Like, I was almost a little surprised how little influence adults have in the school world. Because I just remember there being adults everywhere in school. There was always a librarian or a hall monitor or a cafeteria worker or one of the teachers themselves. Like, I don't remember because there was a feeling of privacy and isolation for these kids.
Yeah, I don't recall having that at any level in school. There was always someone there. Even when it was like a kid organized thing, you had your student your teacher who was sponsoring that event or was your, like you're saying, your mentor for that group or whatever. So yeah, I don't recall that. But maybe when I was in the world at that time, you kind of maybe blocked out the fact that there were teachers there. And it was just sort of your kid world. I could see that, and I liked how this episode presented that because that's all it was. It was like the kids in the class talking before and after. You didn't see them taking tests. You didn't see them having to study. It was just the social aspects of their world.
And do you buy that? Like, do you buy their friendships?
I did.
Because you're right. You're jumping into the middle of the series.
Yeah, I did buy it. I did buy it. I was thrown by the acting. I was thrown by...
So what exactly, like, who else? Like, what did you think of Jamie Gertz's character?
Yeah, the Jamie Gertz character, Muffy.
What do you think of her? She's like the preppy, spoiled
she's the preppy,
high school kiss-ass
exactly.
character.
And she tries to... Like, I don't know if she was the school president, but she basically was acting like the school president in a way that the president of the school got to make all the decisions and organize all the events for all these kids. And again, I think she's a freshman too, but to me, she seems like she's a junior or a senior, the way she acts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought she seemed very young.
Again, it was hard for me to gauge that because everybody seemed to be the wrong age, except for the two leads. They seemed to fit.
I mean, she does seem to be like a cliche. She's a cliche. Character that
she's an
is
over-the-top cartoon character.
Cliche.
I liked her more as I watched the episodes. I got used to the character. I got used to what that character was and what the bit was.
I think she's a great character. I think she has one of the best lines of the series. A few episodes later, there's a comedian kid named Marshall, one of their friends. I think he's attracted to... is he attracted to... I think he's attracted to Lauren. He's like kind of their foursome, and he's this kid who always is making jokes. He makes a joke at Muffy's expense, and I don't quite remember what the joke is, but her response to him, and I feel like it's very telling, not just for who she is, but kind of how we move through school. She does say to him, "I'm going to ignore that because I don't get it," and walks away. Like, I love that character. And again, I can see how that character could be your typical, like, you could move her into another sitcom probably pretty successfully.
Right.
But Jamie Gertz does really good work with that character, I think. Yeah,
and that's why at first, I wasn't impressed with the show at first, but it grew on me. And I think part of the fact that she exists, that character exists in this otherwise, well, not entirely. The two main characters I think are very reality based. They're very relatable. And in
fact, they're some of the most real characters I've ever seen in something.
And then everyone around them, maybe not everyone, but a lot of characters around them are so over the top, including Muffy and Slash. And Marshall is more relatable, I think. But then he's like the closest to actually being a geek or a nerd. Like, you could almost apply a cliche to him, but he wants to be funny. I mean, he reminded me a lot of Sam Levine's character on Freaks and Geeks. Right. Like, I feel like it's the same kind of character. But also, I knew that character in school. That is someone who actually, even by second grade, I knew someone like that who's just always making jokes.
I think I lived with someone like that for a while. But no, I'm just like, I love that character. And he seems, I guess, outside the leads, he seems like a freshman, and he seems very believable with like his jealousies and things like that. Like, I love that character. But you're saying like, so Johnny Slash, you don't think is a very believable character?
No, not really. I mean, he's more of a cartoonish sort of character. I think the Tracy Nelson character is sort of cartoonish, especially early on. I think she becomes a bit more real as these 4 episodes go on, at least to me. And then I can't think of the name of the troubled youth guy. What was the
Vinny. That's the one character I have nothing to say. Like he's the character I feel like that you didn't have a personality.
Yeah. Again, yeah, he seems like just I mean, his name's Vinny. So, of course, he's a cartoon character But he
fluctuates through the series. Sometimes he's a cool guy. Sometimes he's a dumb guy.
Yeah.
But he's not a cool, dumb guy. He's one or the other. It's what serves to him. He's Jennifer's boyfriend.
Yeah. I mean, she thinks so, and sometimes he thinks so. Yeah. It was tough to come into it in episode 12 or 13 because I didn't get who was who. And I thought there was like some hints that Jennifer wanted to be with Vinny, and then later in the episode, they clearly were together. So yeah,
I think she's possessive of him. He is the one character I feel like you could do without. Jennifer has a best friend named LaDonna, who plays into this episode. She wants to be a DJ on the radio station. She's the sole black character at the school, which was my school. Like, and I don't know and I think it's intentional because she makes a lot of, if the show's going to be progressive, she makes a lot of quips and asides to white people and to being the only black girl, and she wants to work at the radio station at the school. She wants to be on it, and she's talking about how it's only white guys on the radio. Like, she's making all these comments, and you don't necessarily see her discriminated against, but it's there. It's an underlying theme that, yeah, she's been discriminated against. Like, what did you think of that character? I loved her.
No, yeah, I liked her. Yeah, no, she was not. Yeah, I didn't see her as cartoony as the others.
I mean, her delivery sometimes could be, when you were saying before about acting, that's what I thought you were talking about. Like, sometimes her delivery is a little Saved by the Bell script reading, but I just thought she was so funny, and her and Jennifer's friendship is very close, and they're like best friends. That's very sweet.
Yeah,
I mean, those are the cast of characters. I with the exception of Vinny, I feel like they're all very realistic individuals. And I know we're not talking much about the episode itself. Why don't we jump into the next one? Because unless there's something like, not much happens in this episode, I guess.
Yeah, it was an interesting. It was a weird one to start with, for me anyway.
Okay. Well, how do you feel about the Merry Pranksters? That's the next episode we saw.
Yes, this again, it sort of disappointed me a little bit because a principal is involved. And I, again, thought that it would be very cool if this series never involved adults.
Yeah, he's a very cartoony principal, too. I have to say, yeah. I don't like that character.
Yeah, and the more you talk about how you're describing it's a 70s kind of sense of humor and putting authority figures, into these being, idiots or sex crazed or whatever. I can see that a lot more now in the series. But yeah, so Merry Pranksters, again, it was the two girls trying to find a way to stand out. And I guess somebody had been pranking the school or putting graffiti somewhere on the school. And so, or doing a prank in class. That's how it started. They did a prank in class where everybody hummed at the same time.
And else that had another one of, I thought, the greatest lines of this series. And I feel like this I related to. So yeah, they're setting up a prank where as the teacher's talking, they're passing a note around class saying, at 10:30, let's all start humming under our breath. So, like all at once, they don't know where the humming's from. But as they're passing the note around, Lauren goes to grab it and the person passes it around her. She doesn't get to look at it. And her response to this, and this again, we're talking about a show where they want to be popular. They want to be in these cliques. But I think they know how ridiculous these cliques are because her reaction to having the note passed around her is, oh, great, another dumb thing we don't know about.
Yeah.
is her line. So she's angry that they're not participating, but she knows that it's dumb. And I think that is the heart of the show. I liked this episode. It's very convoluted because what happens is they wind up, Lauren and Patty decide, like, we're going to do a prank to get popular.
Yeah.
But they're not going to say that they did the prank. Like, it's a lot to go through. But at the heart of it, once again, it's this theme of the show about popularity and about how complicated popularity is and also how awful popularity is. Like, they want to be popular, but it just sucks.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. This episode's a little more sitcom-y. They break into the school in all black clothing. There's some weird music as they're doing that. And moments like that don't work for me. They do the thing that I feel like this was happening in so many sitcoms ever since All the President's Men came out. There's a scene where the guys pose as Deep Throat, like in the trench coat and the hat because they've got some knowledge on what was going on. I saw that on Welcome Back, Kotter kind of thing.
Yep.
So those things, that felt very sitcom-y. That felt a little uneven. So the show's not immune to that, and it's so strangely paced. But this show, more than the previous episode, the previous episode was kind of about physical bodies and just that development of I don't want my glasses kind of thing. This one is just that thing in school, and it's there's a lot of foresight to it because I don't think I realized it at first when I was in high school. It took till senior year to realize that a lot of what you're striving to get in high school is ridiculous, is dumb, and you don't want it. I mean, I think that's what these clicks in popularity are, is Patty does not want to be popular, and Lauren talks about it and wants to be. She's the one who talks it up, but she knows how dumb these high school cliques are, and she still wants to be a part of it. And that's not in a show normally. Normally the people are either above the cliques or they're in the cliques. This is a show that our heroes are so faulted. They're buying into this embarrassing aspect of school. And I know, I thought it's weird that theme is so dramatic and so existential, and it's surrounded by these comical pratfalls and things like this. I like this episode. It didn't work for me at the end as much, but I liked at least that this showed the theme of the show really strongly, I thought.
Yeah, it was, no, yeah, I have very little to add to that. That's well said, Tim.
But did you enjoy watching this episode? Like, were you enthralled in it, or is it you watching it because you have to talk about it on the podcast?
I mean, I don't think I ever would have seen an episode of Square Pegs except that you wanted to talk about it here.
I saw 4.
Yeah, I have now seen 4. But as I'm watching it, I definitely was. I don't know if I was enjoying it as much as I was understanding the appeal of it. Like, I understood the appeal of it being these kids and really relatable. There was some, there's good. I liked the running gag through the Merry Pranksters of one of their pranks really falling flat, but turns out it was the one that had the most success, where they put the school up for sale. And they thought nobody was calling, that wasn't going anywhere. And then somebody was trying to pretend to be calling from the Middle East or something. And then later, towards the end of the episode, a guy kind of stereotypically dressed like a sheik or something comes in, apparently offering money for the school because, and that happens in the background. They don't even, I don't think even realize that that's happening. So like, I enjoyed that. I got that it was definitely trying to be something different than what was on television at that time, and I liked that about it. And I could relate to that, and I could understand why, even though I thought it was kind of poorly acted, it wasn't poorly written, And also the other thing that stood out, and this episode had a lot of it, is all of the shows that I saw growing up were in their own little generic worlds where everything happened in that world, and that world kind of existed in my world, but really it just existed in TV. These shows were set in our world, and they referenced Barbara Walters and the ratings for Little House on the Prairie, and that Michael Landon was no longer on that show, and Card Sharks. They made a reference to Card Sharks. That alone
love it.
was like great. Awesome. This show's amazing. I love it.
So, no, I mean, that's my earliest memory of this, or one of those standout memories is there's the Bill Murray episode, which maybe we should have watched that one. He's flipping through a comic book and he basically reads and makes fun of one of those Hostess ads with the Hulk. I don't know if you remember comic books used to have one-page Hostess, like Twinkie ads with superheroes. Yeah. And I just remember as a kid, I never saw that on a TV show before.
Yeah.
I never saw people call out stuff I knew. And watching it now, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten this in second grade, but like they talk about the Doors, they talk about Josie Cotton. There's Oingo Boingo posters, Roxy Music posters. There's that Munsters versus Addams Family conversation.
And I kind of am interested in going back and watching these episodes now because, like you, after I watched these, I wanted to learn a little bit more. I wanted to see what was on at the same time. You mentioned the Doors. Apparently, the drummer, whose name escapes me now for the Doors,
John Densmore.
Yes. He guests on the episodes, on a couple episodes of the show, as a drummer for one of the characters' bands. I don't know if it's Slash or Vinny, but he's the drummer in the band a couple times. And that band breaks up and then reforms, and he's still the drummer in that second band. And I haven't seen these episodes. It's just me reading about it. And that kind of comedy and writing and building of this universe, as much as I was kind of, it was like nails on a chalkboard, some of this, the way it was acted. At the same time, I get why it was appealing and how people connected to it. And even after so many years, if somebody mentions it, if they watched it, they immediately are like, oh yeah, that show was amazing. Because this seems like the kind of show that had I seen it, and maybe I needed to be a little older still too, because I don't know if I would have gotten these references. Had I seen it, I think I would have very much enjoyed it at that time.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I was enjoying it at that time. Yeah. That's weird to me because I know I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting all of it.
It's your Misfits of Science.
Well, maybe. For the listeners, Misfits of Science was a 1985, 84, 86 sci-fi comedy drama on NBC that Bob got canceled. We did an episode on it. I'll link it in the show notes so you can check that out. But this show, and I guess, we don't have to talk about the last episodes in detail. I think it's more just, this is such an anomaly of 1980s television.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing else like this show. And I don't know if we've done it justice talking about it, but I'm surprised, I guess, that I found it so intriguing at the time. Because this show has always been in my head. And it shaped some of my views. I think both Patty and Lauren shaped my ideas of how to move through high school. And again, I wasn't necessarily these characters. I've never found a character that I felt I totally am, but memories of this from the second grade when I was watching this helped set up and made it a little easier to bear that. I mean, this show is a tragedy. Yeah. Patty and Lauren's life is a tragedy because high school is a fucking tragedy. I mean, they're the most realistic characters on the show. They're different. You're saying like they don't get noticed because they're their own beings. They're their own individuals.
Yeah.
And there isn't space in high school for that. There isn't space for actual individuality in the social setting of high school. They're the most unique minds on the screen, and they still want to be a part of a group. And that group never seems appealing.
Yeah.
And these cliques and the people in these cliques, they make it so miserable for Patty and Lauren to try to be individuals that of course they'd want to be in the cliques just to no longer be made fun of, just to not have this stress. And the people in these cliques, the people like Jennifer and LaDonna, if they weren't so designated by the nature of that clique, to keep using that word, they'd probably be decent people. But I think what this show is looking at and not preaching and also not offering, and this is maybe why it sticks with me, it doesn't offer an antidote to this. We all want to fit into something, and what we want to fit in is never a real thing. We don't want to fit into these, or at least I didn't want to fit into the groups that I thought I wanted to fit in for anything other than just to have the comfort of, well, now I don't have to be me. You know, and the show doesn't pull any punches with that. It's not telling you to be an individual. It's never, I mean, I think it is heroic to a degree, but Patty and Lauren aren't heroic characters. They're tragic characters in school.
Do you think there was an end game in mind where this lesson would be learned by the time they hit their 4th season or whatever? Or do you think that just wasn't the goal at all?
I would like to think it's not the goal. I don't know if it could sustain itself for 4 years because that would get sad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, you're following the growth of high school. I mean, this is written by people who clearly remember, like you were saying yourself, sometimes the writing was better than the acting. This is written by people who clearly get that school was hard, who remember school, who lived through it. And they're using the references of the time that the characters are in, but they get it.
Yeah.
You know, I would hope if the show kept going that it would just, you know, there would be tensions within their friend circles, you know, like Patty and Lauren would have tensions and new characters would come in and people would have falling outs. But no, I mean, I think ideally I would love it if it just showed you how awful school is for 4 years. But the way TV shows work, I think we both know, I think the core cast would eventually become friends. They would soften the edges of the show. If it kept going, one, they'd find a way to keep them in school past 4 years. But two, yeah, I think eventually, like, this is a cruel show. And even characters, like, I guess you don't, but like the character of Jennifer, who I loved as a kid, that's a cruel character. And there's no apology for it, ever.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a weird show for a second grader to want to see every week. Because I'm sure I didn't get all of it.
No, I doubt you did. I doubt you got this level of it. I mean,
yeah. No, I know I didn't. But I think there must have been something in that because it stayed with me.
Yeah.
Because what's engaging about the show, though, if you're not getting something of this themic sadness from it? Like, it's not laugh after laugh after laugh. There are some, I laughed out loud a lot actually watching it, but it's not like you're not timed with a laugh track. I mean, you are because it's there, but it doesn't have the rim shots of,
right.
You know, when I would watch Family Ties or these other shows. That's why I was trying to see what else was on. It's like this, I didn't have a comparison to this show. Yeah,
there's definitely not like space for laughter. They just can kind of talk over it and move on to the next thing. But you, yeah, I mean, I think maybe you're misremembering the laughter part, because I bet you found it funnier than you might be finding it now. I talk about, you know, making references to pop culture in your daily conversations. I mean, maybe you weren't inspired by the show, but certainly it might have laid some groundwork for how you talk and how you talk to people and how you make those references. And so maybe that was...
Maybe. I mean, this was probably like, you know, the example you were saying, like with Little House on the Prairie and Card Sharks. Yeah, this probably showed me that that's how you could talk.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think it's great. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back and maybe watch the series, see the season, see how it unfolds, see how it starts. I still feel like I'm missing out on how it all got established.
Yeah, I think you might be a little let down. That I like the first episode, but it does kind of jump. It is the first day of school, but it jumps right in.
Okay.
You're supposed to know who everybody is.
Okay. Quick question then. The opening monologue that opens every episode, is that from the first episode? That was my assumption.
It's not. I thought it would be, and it's not. I went back and watched the pilot. It's just for the opener.
Wow. Also,
it took me 2 episodes to realize who is saying the majority of it. But then it makes sense. It's Lauren to Patty. It's Lauren's idea to do all that, and that's pretty true to the show, I think.
I think if I had watched this at the time, I would have had a huge crush on Lauren.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's sweet. She's funny, and she has a good sense of fashion.
Yeah.
And I just, again, they are so aware. Like that's what I think was missing. And I don't know why more shows wouldn't do this unless maybe it's just too painful. They are aware of how awful that people are, but also how awful to want this is. Like she flat out, Lauren says it. She's acknowledging how horrible what they want is. That awareness. And I didn't have that till later in high school this is pretty dumb. But I just like, that's such a cynical show, really.
Yeah.
With like endearing leads.
Right?
And I'm sorry it didn't last longer, and I'm sorry that more people haven't seen it. And I don't know. It doesn't sound like it. You were saying you wonder if I remember it wrong. I am wondering how much of this am I rebuilding in my head, but I know it was always in there. I know it was at least there.
Yeah.
And I love it, and I'll rewatch it. I'll show it. I think of stuff we've watched and gone back to, this is one of my favorite things to have just gone back to, because it just speaks volumes. And I wish I could understand more how I liked it as a second grader. Because again, I don't know what's in this show for a second grader, but I'm glad it was there because it definitely, I think you said, laid the groundwork for something.
I am sure that there are listeners out there that have the same connection to square pegs. Maybe not for the same reasons, but square pegs mean something to them, and I'd like to hear from them.
Oh, I would too then, because I feel like I enjoy talking to you, but I don't feel like you like the show. Which is fine.
Respect square pegs.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that good?
That's great. I bet square pegs would appreciate that. And if you appreciate it like square pegs appreciates it, segue into what? Oh God, this is going bad. I thought I had it. You know what it is? I gotta pee. That's what it is.
So you just want this over with.
Let's wrap it up. And then I'll run. If you like the show, thank you for listening to the show. If you like the show, you can find out more about the show, maybe subscribe to the show, hear past episodes of the show at 20popcast.com. That's the main show website. Always has the most recent episode up there, as well as links to all of our past episodes. I would encourage you, if you enjoyed today's episode, or maybe there's an episode prior to this one that's recent enough that you enjoyed it, so you came back for this one, check out some old episodes. We've got 78 episodes in there. It's a lot of topics that we've covered. We'll be covering more in the upcoming weeks and months. You can also follow the show there. There's links to follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at 20popcast, Instagram at 20popcast, and you can also just follow me as an individual who has to pee at Subcultist. Bob, plug yourself, because I'm really plugging something right now.
You can follow me as well at RH Canning on Twitter. So follow and tag and let us know what you think about square pegs. And Lauren Hutchinson, because I would have had a crush on her.
Oh, which is nice, except you're a 42-year-old man.
Hey, she was competing with a 30-year-old teacher for a 24-year-old janitor, so I think everything's open.
She was doing it in that way that high schoolers do it when you have an adult that you talk to and you feel like you're equals. You're doing it in sort of an Elizabeth Perkins and Big sort of way.
Yeah, which is totally cool. I'm cool with that.
All right. Listeners, if you're cool with that, Bob's phone number is no, but that's great. That's wonderful.
I'm cool with Elizabeth Perkins and Big, so if that's what you're comparing me to, I can live with that.
How are you cool with Elizabeth Perkins and Big?
People should check out the episode and you'll find out. The big
Elizabeth
episode.
Perkins and Big episode. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bob's got a catchphrase for you, and I gotta go.
Yeah, Tim's got a toot. I've got some kids that are a little hard to wrangle, but we're working on that.
So. Yeah, Elsa and I got a couple kids this past weekend.
Hey,
we're doing
nice.
Great. No,
Congratulations.
It's a breeze, and these are troubled kids, but we're doing fine. I can't get over it. Like, we're in shape, we're well rested. We've got a lot of time just to read the books we want to read and do little projects by ourselves. So, yeah, no, buying these two kids.
That's key.
The best.
You got to be able to do your little projects.
Yeah, no, I'm really into it, and it's like I love all of their parents. So their friends' parents, they're the best people. It's great.
That is good.
That's really super. And sometimes when I run into somebody and the kids are with me, I don't talk about them. I can talk about something else. This is the best. Parenting's the best.
It is. You're a lucky man.
I never want to do it, ever. I do not.
You're a smart man, also.
Well, here, I want to say you are, but that's recorded.